Okay, and welcome to this very special edition of News Blips. We are going to be talking about the really tragic murder of cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. I'm being joined by my screenwriter colleagues and the hosts of the Film Dorks podcast. We've got Tom Curley, who is an Academy Award and BAFTA-winning sound mixer. We've got Lucas Longacre, who is a independent filmmaker, and Nick Berg, who is a former assistant director. We're also joined by author of the book, The Legacy Letters, and former member of the Craftsman Local 44 Union. Is that correct, Carew?
Yeah, Local 44 IATSE in Hollywood, yeah.
Okay, and he's also the only one here, I believe, who's worked with Marlon Brando out of all of us, so...
Whoa!
He's got that on us. So
that's
Carew,
cool.
Peppers, thanks for joining us.
Someone has to do it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, somebody had to take that abuse.
So I am the least experienced on set out of all of us here. My experience in the past was primarily location scouting, but between everyone else, many years of experience. So I thought we could just talk about this horrible tragedy, and I'd like to talk about each of your experience on set. Carew, I'd like to start with you. Again, this was the union that's responsible for well, the props. You were part of the union. Can you just talk about your history with your career a little bit, and any history with experience with firearms?
I've got no history with firearms whatsoever, so I should state that from the beginning. But I pretty much worked on every type of shoot: low budget, big budget, no budget, non-union, union, film, TV, commercial, music videos, the whole 9 yards. What you really do, and this was out of Hollywood, so when you're at the low end of the totem pole like I was, you work your way up until you get into the unions. You get what they call Taft-Hart lead, which means you actually get onto a shoot that's going to go union, and you finally get your gold card, the magic card that gets you into motion picture union, and then you're quote unquote fantastic. It's a great place to be. So one of the interesting parts about this is when this shooting first happened, and my wife was telling me about it, I said, well, I bet this is a union, non-union problem, especially in that it's in a right-to-work state. And sure enough, I looked it up and confirmed my initial beliefs about what was occurring. And it's not just the union, non-union aspect of it. It's the fact that shoots go sour, and they go sour because it's depending upon the budget and depending upon the producer. Especially the more low budget is, the more non-union it is, you're going to find yourself cutting corners left and right. And when you start to cut corners, you start to have people penny pinching on everything from food to hotels, especially if you're on location and all this. And what's amazing is when you've done this for long enough, which I did for about 10 years, that you begin to, right out of pre-production, especially I worked primarily as a set dresser and also as a driver. I was was able to do both at a certain time, a non-union position. But when a shoot is getting sort of weird on you, and it's not going to, especially with the AD or the UPM, unit production managers, you begin to sense that we better protect our own in this. And I think some of the other guys on this, especially AD, will understand that position, whereby things are starting to get wonky in the beginning. And a great shoot should be perfectly planned with very, very little, hiccups. And when it's not, then people get a sense of that. It's sort of like dogs sensing fear or whatever it is. And they start to
they can on any shoot, and I'm sure Tom could probably even speak to this a little bit more because he has just a massive wealth of experience over the last 30 years or 25 years. Boy, I'm sorry, I'm dating you, Tom. But you've been on a lot of different shoots, certainly. But that is true. Like any shoot I've been on, and most of them have been mostly non-union. I've been on a couple union, non-union mixes, and or just straight non-union indie low budget stuff. And you can, a lot of it relies on the tone and that a lot of that tone on your set is going to come from your AD and your second AD. because they are kind of in the awkward position of being the liaison between crew and production, in a lot of ways, especially your seconds, really. But as a first AD, I mean, they're one of their major jobs is safety. It is the first AD's responsibility in the end, safety on the set. And that is obviously an area that went grossly wrong,
Right.
and falls on that person's shoulders a great deal. There are a great deal to blame in this situation.
Now, Tom, you have worked on a set. I saw you post online that you worked on a film set in which a gun was fired inadvertently. What was that experience?
Yeah, well, I mean, first off, let me say that a lot of people that don't do this job, um, they see a lot of what Hollywood puts out, and they see how this high energy group of people working with movie stars, and it's very cool, and it almost doesn't seem like it's a job.
Oh, but
But
it is.
but it's a but it's a workplace. I mean, this is people's careers. It's not just a bunch of hippies running around having a good old time. We're at a workplace, and there's OSHA standards that these employers are supposed to abide by, and the purpose is to keep everybody safe. And um I have worked on a set where a gun got discharged, and that was a non-union movie at the time. We
Did it become
had
union as a result of that?
Yeah, it did. We went on strike, and very shortly after that, it was a union film. But it was shot in a very rural place where there's not a lot of production infrastructure, and it was shot on kind of a wing and a prayer. The people that were producing it had barely enough money to make this movie, and um, a lot of things come up when you don't really like plan for uh, complications or catastrophes.
Now, on a
Because
set like on a low budget film like that, did you have an armorer? Did you have someone that was
No,
solely
we didn't.
responsible? Okay.
So the movie only had one scene with a gun in it, and it was a shotgun, and this guy runs outside and he fires it into the night sky. And so the producers found a guy locally that owned a shotgun and rented it from him, which is not the way you're supposed to do it.
That sounds.
And
Well, I'm just gonna rent a gun from someone. We can do that,
and
right?
the uh, the prop person was a young green worker that hadn't had a lot of experience around guns, and everybody was kind of loose on this production, and until one night there was a bunch of people hanging outside smoking cigarettes and whatnot, waiting for lighting to get set up or something, and blammo, a hole gets blown through the wall, and our props person decided that the way you safety check a shotgun is to just pull the trigger. And it turns out it was loaded with a real shotgun shell, and thankfully nobody got hurt. But after that, everybody took a real serious look at what we were doing, and decided that we needed to have some standards.
No, I've read the protocol for, especially if you're working with a revolver, is to fire. You're supposed to fire it into the ground 6 times, and then the next. It's supposed to. It's a series of safe the checks you're supposed to go through, including shooting to the ground, just to make sure there's nothing in the barrel.
Right.
So, which obviously didn't happen here. Lucas, you've produced films. I'm curious. Now, Alec Baldwin was the producer on this film as well. I'm curious as to what's your opinion on his response? I mean, as an actor, I think most of us can agree that, as unfortunate as it was, I mean, was handed a gun. It was his responsibility ultimately, but realistically, I think most people aren't putting this whole blame on him.
Sure.
But
I mean,
he is a
No,
producer.
but I have an opinion.
My perspective is that when an issue like this happens, it's top-down responsibility. But then let's be real, it's everyone's responsibility. Like everybody on set has a responsibility to be safe. And when you're handed a gun as an actor, which the thing I don't understand most is they were rehearsing. You should not be rehearsing with a real gun, even if it's a prop gun. Like you should be rehearsing with just a fake rubber gun. There's no reason. Like you only bring a firearm on set when you're ready to roll, right? And then because it's serious and everybody should be serious. Like most of my shoots I've ever done, been produced or worked on, we didn't really have budgets for an armorer. So what we did is we didn't have a gun. Everything was done in post. It was all fake guns. And you can tell like most of the time, because back then the effects weren't even as good, but that's the trade-off, because this is just entertainment. Like there's no reason to risk safety.
Right. John Schneider, who
I saw that.
Yeah. And he's unfortunately, he's one of the people that have been outspoken about this, who don't agree with Alec Baldwin's politics. So I think that's definitely influencing their opinions.
Yeah,
but he did make a point though of him. He had just pretended that he shot a quick video of him shooting, and showed how easy it is to fake, at least quickly fake, the blast of a gun.
Yeah, I mean, filmmaking is an illusion, and that's the thing that when I was teaching all the time, I tell my students, like, accidents happen on set when there's no weapons, when there's no even like fight scenes. People like I had a student actually who had a whole fight scene in their student film, so they had insurance, thankfully, through the school. Do you know how their actor got injured? And not on that scene, not in the fight scene. They got injured when an actor put an elbow through a picture window or something, and ended up breaking it and getting their arm stitched up.
Wow.
So like accidents happen when there's no firearms involved.
Right.
Accidents happen when there's no fight scenes involved. So like having rigid standards of safety is extremely important, especially when it comes to indie film and low budget, no budget. Like it's this thing I drill into my performers' heads all the time, in my students' heads. One of the things that I did for a film I had called Food Cart, first of all, I didn't write a gun into a scene. Like we actually had a gun in one of the scripts, and I wrote it and turned it into a knife, because I was like, I can't afford to do like, get an armor and do anything like legitimately that's going to look good on film, but also be safe. So I just wrote the gun out of the script, which I highly recommend low budget indie people, like be creative in your writing to get rid of as much of those issues as possible. But then also in that, I had just moved to Portland. I didn't know too many people. So I couldn't find a good stunt coordinator and stunt actor to work with my principal actor. So what I did is I stepped in and filled in it for the role, because I have stunt training. I have also, stage choreography training. So I essentially casted myself, because I was the only one I could trust to do that safely with the actor. Right. And that's the idea, is like in indie film, you find ways to keep the level of safety there. You just have to, and also we rehearsed like 3 times before the shoot. Like you can make up for your budget by putting in extra energy and coordination, and there's no way around being safe. Like, and honestly, it's everyone's responsibility. Like an actor should be, by the way, just for anybody who wants to like be an actor, like take gun safety class, learn, like don't fear guns, learn how to use them properly. And so when somebody hands you a gun, you check it every time just to make sure it's empty.
And that's my issue with Alec Baldwin on this, for 2 reasons. One, he's a producer. So a lot of and let's be honest, a large part of the camera crew walked the night before. Right. So technically, hours before this accident happened, they walked off the set because they were being forced to work long hours. They were exhausted. Things were being run poorly, and that's from the top. And so obviously he has culpability as a producer, but he does have culpability as an actor. This isn't a guy who just got out of freaking acting school at college and was just gung-ho to do his first thing. This guy's handled guns in numerous movies. I mean, go ahead and watch all of Alec Baldwin's films. I guarantee he's fired guns in his films before. He's not green in this area. So he does have to take some level of responsibility for not clearing a check himself, which actors are supposed to do when they get a gun. And if they're not, the AD should be there being like, clear,
you didn't double check it.
Clear that gun.
Check.
Crew, you have you worked on any films? I mean, to Tom's point before about this, this basically went to his experience was it went from a non-union film to a union film. This seems like it is the opposite. I feel like a lot of the union people walked away and they brought in non-union people. I was wondering if you had any experience of a situation where things went south on a set like this.
Oh yeah, yeah, and actually, yeah, that was a really interesting experience, and especially the thing I did look up, and I had actually talked to a few buddies of mine to clarify. But when New Mexico and Arizona, they're right to work states, so when you're out there, it's when you lose a union member off a crew, you're supposed to vet it with the union. You're supposed to go back and call it. But when on these sort of, and it's not a fly-by-night production. It's not that low budget. It's a $6 million budget, but in Alex Baldwin's world, that's a low budget film.
Right.
So they're rocking and roll. They're trying to burn it out as quickly as possible. I don't know what their shoot was. Maybe it was 6 weeks, 5 weeks, 4 weeks. I don't know, whatever, but they're really gunning it. So, and to, I think it was Thomas's point, was it Thomas? The fact that the camera crew walked off. Of all the set crews, the camera crew was the most gigantic red flag on the planet. I mean, when they walk, it's not like the art department or greensmen walk off, or you know, like makeup. Oh, makeup walked off. Yeah, right. Nobody remembers that. But camera, that's it. They're the guys that put it in the can. Who could care less about the director? You can actually shoot a movie without a director. I was on a set once, low budget. The director walked off, and I was there, and someone said, "Can someone take over?" I said, "Sure, I'll take over." Really, seriously? And it was a Cujo, Ali Sheedy lookalike film. It was really bad.
Well, this sort of reminds me about another point that I wanted to make, is that even though this is a job that lots of people have, it's relatively unregulated. Like there's no hard standard to get into filmmaking. Like basically, if you show up and then you keep showing up, you're in. And there are standards to get into the union, but in non-union films, basically anybody can be employed without really any checks of any kind. And a lot of these jobs get filled with word of mouth references and phone calls.
And people who will do it for whatever they're offering, which in some of these movies,
Nick, right.
and like you said, this is a $6 million film. This isn't a $500,000 to $1 million film. There's some money behind this, you know. This kind of, I mean, it should never happen on any set. But
trouble is how I see it. Like honestly, like it. Like I said, if you're gonna do something super low budget, like you tend to have to then be creative in how you work around your obstacles. But if you have just enough money to like hire the lowest paying person who will take the job, you know, so you almost have like a worse situation where you have incompetent people filling roles instead of being like, how do we write around this shot?
Well, that was the case here. The Halyna Hutchins Gutierrez, the armor. It was only her second film, and the first one when she did, it was Nicolas Cage walked off because
Nicolas Cage got pissed because
how unsafe
she was firing guns near the set for no reason. You know, and she needs to be held culpable.
The more I hear about it,
I can do this job. Her and the first AD, it's the first AD's responsibility to make sure a set is secure and safe. And Alec Baldwin, all three of them need to take some responsibility for the death of this woman and the injury of the director. They were murdered. They were.
And Jeff, I'm sorry, Nick.
No, I'm just saying, you know, they were. I mean, it might be, you know, it was negligence, and I'm certainly not intentional on anybody's part, I would assume, you know, obviously, but yeah, this is just awful, and people need to pay the price for this.
Yeah. And what's so fascinating is when, you know, I was referring to before about sets going sour, or a production going sour, and what I mean, it's going south. You can tell in the beginning when it starts to become unsafe, when it starts to break down. And then what happens is that, you know, my lead man or the key grip or whoever will start to protect their own. You know, they'll really come around. And on this set, I actually got hurt on a set. And this was the one where I was going back and forth between LA and locations and New Mexico, Arizona and whatnot. And so again, non-union, they're working me to the bone. I'm coming back, and, you know, 12-hour turnarounds. I get up, I'm putting up tire chains up in a garage at 2 a.m. for a 6 a.m. call. And I fall off the ladder and I get hurt, and it was like, oh, okay, we'll take care of you. Make sure you get to the doctor. And then I had to find my way back home. and it's that whole non-union mentality, like go, 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 go.
Right.
And
Yep.
but it was happening all throughout that set. And the lead up, I mean, when I read about like, oh, the hotel situation, the food situation, and I bet there's more, there it is. It's a shoot gone south, and it just kept going south and south. And all you guys know that have been on productions, when it's a bad production, it goes worse.
Tom,
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
is, Tom,
matter
you
of fact, a lot of us got started on a production that ended up going very south at the end, where the entire crew walked after a 23-hour day.
wait,
Only 23 hours? That was it?
Only
is that the same
23
film I worked on?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that happened. Oh, that's exciting. Oh, we'll talk about that
I
later.
wasn't there those last 2 days. I was the second AD on that film, but I got married. But I heard that everybody walked the last day because
Wow,
they
I didn't know that.
pushed shooting 23 hours, and people just got fed up and walked off.
Yeah, no, I was early production. I wasn't there that late. Interesting. Tom, what is the you've worked on plenty of films with gun fire, I'm assuming, with gunplay. What are the safety protocols that you've observed?
Generally they limit who are allowed to be near them, to a very exclusive few people, which are generally the firearms professionals, the AD, and the actors, or stunt people.
Right.
And there's checking, there's communication of like what is to be expected of the event that we're filming, and there's a lot, like usually extra rehearsals, and a lot of times they do use rubber guns, all the way up to when they're just doing medium and close-up shots, then they'll put in real guns on some of these shows.
And a lot of those times, those are dummy rounds in those guns. If they're not actually firing the gun, if it's just like a close up to see what the gun looks like, or you're not gonna see the actual muzzle fire. There's just dummy rounds in there, so that it looks more authentic. But and then obviously it's blanks when they're actually firing the gun.
And also something that started on extremely low budget movies, but has sort of elevated into mildly low budget movies as well, as the use of airsoft guns. And there are other more expensive, like gas operated automatics and stuff that look more legit than airsoft guns, but generally speaking, if you add in a blam blam and some flame effects and After Effects or whatever, it's gonna sell it most of the time.
Right.
And they're cheap, they look decent, and they have absolutely no ability to hurt anyone.
Right.
However, there's a lot to be said for what a real gun looks like too. And
well, especially on a film like this, when we're talking about this film Rust, it's a Western.
Yeah, it's a period.
So it's important to show authentic firearms from that period. I mean, you're not going to pull an airsoft Glock out
that would
on.
be a little awkward.
But this, I think this also speaks greatly to what's been going on with IATSE and with the potential strike, and it's still not over. That's still a potential outcome, and I think this just goes to show that people need to be voting no on what they were offered, and demand more, demand safer sets, demand safer protocols.
Do you believe that do you think this will set a precedent for firearms on set going forward?
I mean, there was a huge precedent set when Brandon Lee died on The Crow. Things changed in the industry, and nobody, to my knowledge, nobody else has died up until now.
They have. Well, not because of a gun, but
I'm saying because of a gun. I'm saying because of a gun. Yes, there's been. I
think, but that Greg Allman or the Greg Allman film with this location manager never actually secured the location for the train tracks and.
Right. I mean, that just goes to speak to what IATSE is fighting for. And this is just a glaring reason that they should vote no, and they should go on strike if they need to. I think a lot of the country is kind of waking up to this stuff right now. People are sick of being, beat down by greed, and
Yeah, and Curio, I wanted to ask you. So, have you been on productions where the producers and/or director, whoever, get obsessed with like being legitimate or being authentic in the stuff that they show on screen? Because it seems to be an obsession for some people.
Yeah, that's yeah. You brought up. We worked on this low budget deal, and it was non-union again, where I remember, and this is such a funny example. He was a Hungarian director, and I was in the background, and we'd set up the lights and everything, and I noticed that one of the windows was super dusty, so I went over to dust it off, and he comes and yells at me in Hungarian, and I was like, "What did I do? What did I do?" And his translator said, "You're removing the dust. That's the dust that's supposed to be there for the shoot. This is the real dust." And he just was,
real dust.
Yeah, it was real dust. We didn't put it there. So are you destroying I was destroying the set, and I was like, yeah. So based upon that, but to the greater point, I not a lot. I shot a lot in Hollywood locations. I maybe 60-40. So the authenticity part, I saw that, but not to the degree that Hungarian. But these guys, when they want to be creative and they want to push it, right? They'll try to make it depends on how much leverage they have.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people that haven't really made it per se have this kind of obsession with overdoing things or going super hard, or just trying to sort of prove to the world how hardcore of a super boss they are. And
yeah, I do think also that people feel like to get realism on film, you need to actually show things real, not understanding that it's all an illusion. You should be able to recreate reality. That's what we all do when we make films. So this idea that and I've heard about it with stunt performers too, who talk about not the trained performers, but when you get an actor who's not trained, and they just go too hard in a scene, not understanding that where you put your camera and how you react is everything, right? But they think, no, we really have to be tussling and fighting to make it look real.
Right.
And that's completely not understanding the medium at all.
And it goes to speak to what you were saying before, work within your budget. If this movie was a $6 million budget, but it was written and needed to be 12 million, now here you go, forcing your schedule into an unshootable schedule and pushing your crew.
It happens all the time.
Past the amount of time that a human being should be worked, especially at the physical level you work on a film set. Everybody works their ass off. This is hard work. It's not it's not like you were saying, Thomas, it's not hippy dippy land. It's not just hanging out, but it's not college films. This is hard fucking work. You're lifting, you're using, there's a lot of danger that
you're standing around in inclement weather for hours, which nobody ever tells you about.
Hooking up generators and running cables and and you're exhausted, and then they won't put you up in a hotel, and now you have to drive an hour and a half home. And you lose an hour and you lose 3 hours of sleep, and they just gave you a fucking 8-hour turnaround. So how much sleep are you going to get? Absolutely. It's ridiculous, and it's dangerous, and it needs to stop.
All right. Well,
on that note, guys.
No, I mean, to Nick's point, I remember coming back from shoots on turnarounds like that, and you've got to come down, right? You've been up all day, 16, 17 hours. Well, 16 hours, because that's when they cut you off, because they don't want to pay you quadruple time, right? Especially on a union shoot.
If you're even getting that.
Yeah, if you're even getting that,
if it's non-union.
And I remember once I came back and I'm winding down. I've got to, I'm going to turn around in 4.5, 5 hours. And I had a beer, and I remember drinking it, and I woke up and the beer was in my hand and it hadn't moved. And I saved the beer. It was absolutely And it never fell off. I was like, wow, you were so tired, but you were
Right.
going to clutch that beer that you were going to save it. I don't know.
Yeah,
All right, well,
it's
gentlemen,
ridiculous.
Thank you all for your time. This is obviously a horrible tragedy, and I hope
it
at
is.
least it does lead to some future safety protocols going forward. We can only
Yeah.
hope.
And I'll say just to independent filmmakers out there, like, you know, you might have fewer resources, but you have more control than you realize.
Right.
And truly safety is
Yeah,
everyone's
it's your
responsibility on
imagination
set.
and creativity.
Exactly.
Well put.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
Thanks,
it's not
guys.
worth the risk.
Be safe. It's only a movie, right? It's
Right.
only
Yeah.
make believe.
Right.
Only
Don't
a
kid
movie.
yourself. Only
We
make-
don't need to be entertained that much.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Take care. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks.
Peace.
Thanks, Jeff.